Hello and welcome everyone. I'm David Vaillencourt, founder and CEO of the GMP Collective. At the GMP Collective, our goal is to ensure the quality and safety of natural treatments and therapies. We've extracted the highlights from our latest When Things Go Wrong episode right here for you in just 10 minutes. In this episode, Lab Testing, Could Your Results Be Wrong? We were joined by esteemed panelists Kelly O'Connor, Jini Glaros, and Rob O'Brien, who are laboratory representatives operating in Oregon, Florida, and British Columbia, Canada. Spanning both the US and Canada in the lab testing world of cannabis, they shared their invaluable perspectives on the issues and sources of lab errors common in the cannabis industries globally. This summary video will highlight the most important points for our discussion, focusing on key factors that lead often to inaccurate test results, such as THC inflation, representative sampling, lack of adequately validated and standardized test methods, and some reports of CRM shopping. What does all this mean? Tune in. We'll also touch on how these issues are being addressed and the opportunities for alignment within the industry, because it's one thing to talk about the problems, but it's more important to talk about real solutions and put them into actions. So whether you're a professional in the field, a curious enthusiast, or someone interested in the cannabis industry's quality assurance and control measures, this video is for you. Stay tuned and let's dive into these enlightening perspectives. I hope you enjoy. This is really exciting. So to kick us off, Rob, everyone, I'm sure if you haven't heard about lab testing, I don't believe you. I'll just say that, especially if you're here. But so everybody's heard about, common lab testing problems, from sampling issues that talk about lab shopping and THC inflation. So I want to start with you, Rob. In your opinion, have we been defining these problems adequately? And, kind of share a little perspective on that.
Yeah, so in the last while, I've been focusing a bit on this issue of in-store testing and the correlation between labs. Everything has been framed in an idea that lab shopping is the responsibility of the labs. It's not. The people who are lab shopping should be equally or more responsible. They're the ones that are making money. But in defense of that, a lot of people have suggested, well, there's no standard methods. There's no inability to consistently test this. And that's completely incorrect. In Canada, we've been running proficiency testing programs for about 4 years now, twice a year. If you look at the results from that, the relative standard deviations are quite low. So it's something that's easy to test. In fact, when you're looking at an analyte that's in percent or the part per thousand region, this is not something that's challenging. We look at things in the natural health product sector or in terms of the US, the dietary supplement sector. These are analytes that are quite readily able to test. If you look at other jurisdictions like Europe and Australia, where they enforce the limits, there's not a THC inflation issue. So it's kind of uniquely a North American one. And it's not just in the US. We found about 30% testing below label claims. But even then, as I think through this, rather than say it's the labs, what I'm coming to the conclusion is that it's not a fit for purpose test. So if you test the harvest at the very beginning, even if you sample and you get a good average value, that will be at best an average value of that harvest. It tells you nothing about the variance within the harvest. And the different growers can have much tighter or more diverse variance within that harvest. So we don't have any information on that. And people are using that high value that they're getting from the harvest and putting it on their labels. It's not fit for purpose for labels. Another thing that's kind of unique about cannabis is as it's processed and it goes through mechanical handling, you're losing some trichomes. And so the variance between buds is actually increasing quite significant. So it can be as much as 30 or 40%, as much as we had 48% in one case from the initial one. So you need to test the finished product. And this is something that is very reasonable to do. We're able to do this in dietary supplements, and that if you look at a powdered echinacea product, it's not that far off of label claim. If you buy caffeine in a capsule, you're not going to get something that's 40% below that label claim. It's been tested as a finished product. So we can test it. We need to focus on fit for purpose. When we did inter-lab studies, we found that when we sent common samples to other labs, we were within, a couple percentage of each other. So we're able to do the test, but clearly the manufacturers aren't testing at the right point. We have something different in Canada, is that we only sell packaged material. So a 1 gram pack is 1 gram. Whereas in some dispensaries in the US, you can basically subsample a bulk. Those are both totally different problems in terms of what the THC content. So we need to focus on what the real issue is here and make sure that we channel and have proper fit for purpose testing.
Thanks, Rob. And I think that you just identified probably at least 5 different issues that tie in at a high level, and tying it back to fit for purpose, right? It's looking at the devil's in the details, right? With there's a difference between an edible, there's a difference between bulk flower, there's a difference between a pre-roll and packaged flower. And if we're not considering that when we create our scheme for testing and how we get that single number at the end of the day, which is what I think part of the problem is as well, where we're doing ourselves a disservice and kind of glossing over the real issues. Kelly or Jini, I don't know if either one of you want to jump in and add to that with any perspectives, or from your side.
Yeah, so when it comes to sampling, so Florida is very strict about their sampling protocol. There's all kinds of requirements, and we have to sample in final product packaging. And then once we take that sample, we then have to composite it before we can run potency. And similar to kind of what Rob was talking about, you can really see the differences even in that packaging. So we actually took 2 separate cultivars, and we took 2 3.5 gram containers that were part of our retention sample, and we dumped all the buds out and we analyzed each of the individual buds. There was about 10 buds in each one. And, in one of those cultivars, we saw a difference of just in those 2 jars, 5.7% difference in potency. So we're talking, 17% to, 23%. That's a drastic jump. And so if you're not sampling properly, you really are going to be skewing these results. And so, sometimes labs are being accused of inflating numbers when maybe it's not the lab. Depending on how the sample came to them, those numbers may have already been manipulated in some way based on the sample that was taken and the sample that was sent to the lab. And so I really do think that fit for purpose, collecting that sample in that final packaging is just essential to providing consumers with the truth and providing consumers with the real numbers and providing consumers with an idea of what they're actually getting.
I love it. Is it fair to make an analogy of I'm envisioning one of my favorite snacks is peanut M&Ms, and imagining that they're all different sizes in that package, and like you test one and you're like, that's 23%, and then that one's 17%. And imagine if that was sugar, right? It's like some M&M packages have way more sugar than others. That we've got to characterize that range, and we're not dealing with M&Ms, we're dealing with a much more heterogeneous product.
Extremely heterogeneous product. Like it's crazy some of the stuff that you can see. And so I do think sampling is a really, really big part of ensuring that your test results are correct.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for sharing that perspective. Kelly, I'm sure you've got a few thoughts here on like sampling and other root causes of the situation. Jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen a lot of variation there. If one day we can blossom into a somewhat self-regulated industry, just imagine some distant future where, companies making cannabis products are able to collect their own materials, send it on in. That's a risk for sure, because as we said, standardization of sampling will help to reduce the variances of the products, help reduce any inflation capabilities as well. But that is the direction we're heading into. And so I would just say, as it stands now, we have regulation handed to us state by state for how to collect samples. In some states, it's required that the laboratory go on site and collect the samples themselves. So that should be an area where there's reduced variance. But it's still an area where we see so many issues, right? And even if the regulations is handed down, even if the labs are supposed to do that type of sampling. So that's why when you're looking for consistency in results, and if you're on this webinar and it's your responsibility to help regulate those practices, seek for the standards, which do exist. There are reference materials available within ASTM and a couple other organizations that can give great guiding practices for, the maximum amount of sample that would still be considered representative. The increments for compositing, as Jini mentioned, that's kind of a very key detail. These are very technical, scientific outlines, right? That in a self-regulated quality system, say if you're working in food or supplements, people have honed in on where they can achieve the most consistency for their product. But again, at this stage in the life of cannabis regulations in the United States, we see that it's often handed down to us through regulatory pathways. So that is kind of my 2 cents on that. I would just piggyback on what Jini and Rob have already said. That is one of the biggest issues of variability, and areas where we can inflate numbers or they can be deflated by certain types of selective sampling. But to provide a appropriate for that product, fit for product, like Rob was mentioning, sampling program that has been validated, meaning that if we sample in the same way over and over and over, we understand what the range of testing is on those results. That'll tighten up anybody's program. This webinar is not for people who are trying to cheat the system. It's for people who are looking to create consistency, to understand more about their product, and to make sure that their testing is actually representative of the product themselves. This is how we can help you with those ways at any of the laboratories here on this call or through the GMP Collective, by providing some guidance and standardization of those sampling practices per the product that you're working with specifically.
Thank you for checking out highlights from our latest webinar series episode, When Things Go Wrong on Lab Testing. We hope you found these insights valuable. If you're interested in diving deeper, we invite you to watch the full 1-hour discussion. And remember, we make all these episodes available for free on our YouTube channel after they air live. To stay updated on our latest offerings and to be the first to hear about the next episode, so you can tune in live and ask questions from our panelists, please sign up for our newsletter. Both links are on your screen. Remember, knowledge is power, and staying informed is the best way to ensure quality and safety in the cannabis industry. Thank you again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.